Hi everyone, it's Alison from Prepare to Excel here. I've been asked to create a video tutorial that focuses on how Excel works with values and text when they are combined in the same cell together. So for example, in this instance, we've got some numbers, a space, and then the word minutes. And if I scroll down this data, you can see that that kind of pattern is continued throughout this column. There's no hours to worry about. There's no seconds to worry about. It is just two numerical values. Sometimes there is one. So we've got 8 minutes there, 3 minutes there, and I think there's a 7 further up. So sometimes there's one digit. Most of the time there's two digits, and then there's a space, and then there's a word minutes. There's a couple of different ways that you can manipulate Excel to extract that numerical element out of column A. Now, you could use a left function for that. You could use the data tab to convert text into columns, because what this will do, you can use it to sort of say, well, there's a delimiter. The delimiter could be that space that separates the numbers and then the text. You could separate those two columns, that entire column, you could separate it into two different columns. However, I feel that the easiest way to convert this information to extract the numerical values is to use Flash Fill. Now, Flash Fill also lives on that data tab. It is over here in the data tools section. It's got a little button on it that's got kind of a lightning strike over some cells, a little logo to represent some cells. However, Excel needs to have some sort of clues. And before I do anything, I actually want to convert this information into a table. A couple of ways that you can do that as well. You can use your Home tab, Format as Table. You get to choose the color straight away from the offset if you use that method. You can also click on Insert and then Table, but the easiest method by far is Control and T. If you are going to, well, for any of those methods, don't be clicked in an empty cell. Excel won't understand what you want to convert into a table. You don't necessarily need to highlight all of the data either, but if you're just, as long as you are just somewhere in the information, so I've just randomly clicked on one of the cells within the data, I'm then going to choose Control and T on my keyboard, you'll get this little message, little dialog box that confirms that we are creating a table. You'll get a little absolute cell reference to confirm the cell range. So I always kind of double check that. So it's suggesting that it's A1, scroll down all the way up to and including A30, and that looks spot on for me. Then you've got a ticky box that by default should always be ticked to say that my table has headers. And that just means that I've got something in the very first row that describes the content of each column. That's brilliant. I'll click OK to that. It'll change it to some weird and wonderful color automatically. Let's just see what it's going to do and pray that it doesn't go not responding. There we go. I'm not a fan of blue. So I'm just going to use my table design. So this is a contextual menu that I can use to just alter the colors and other various wonderful things as well. Right, so earlier on, we were talking about using Flash Fill. So what I'm going to do in cell B1, I'm going to add the word minutes. And in this column, I'm going to extract the very first one or two numerical values. I need to give Excel a bit of a clue to start with. So I've just manually typed in 1,4 because obviously that's what should be in B2. Eventually, I want all of the other cells in column B to just extract the number that lives in column A. I'm going to press enter because I want to get out of edit mode. Flash Fill won't work if you're in edit mode. So I've clicked on enter just to take me to the cell underneath. I could have clicked on the cell underneath. And in actual fact, even if I was clicked on cell B2, it would work absolutely fine. Flash Fill, I think I might have already mentioned this, lives over here in the data tools, little logo with the lightning strike on it, but it is also done using a keyboard shortcut, which is Control and E. So I'm going to use that keyboard shortcut. There we go. So straight away, Flash Fill in its brilliance, has just extracted each and every number from column A magically. It's not pulling through any spaces, and I can see that it's leaning to the right. It's left aligned, which is a good indication that it's automatically applied, or it understands that this is a number. Okay, it might not necessarily have changed anything in the data type. No, it hasn't. It's still set to general, but by virtue of the fact that it's right aligned, Excel understands that this is a number. There's no text in here, it's just a number. But what I also want to do with this information is I want to add it together. Now I could do a sum function underneath here, that would do the job for me, but in normal Excel rules, it's just going to add them all together. It's not going to understand that they're minutes yet. So there's a little bit more that I could do with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on C1 and I'm going to add the word time. Now in C2, I'm going to add a function. There's a function called time. I'm just going to type it in manually because it's not a difficult function to understand. In actual fact, what I'll do is I'll zoom in a little bit, because the more zoomed in I am, the easier it is for you to see. Equals time, there we go. I'm not bothered about using my capitals for the function names. It'll add that in for me afterwards automatically. So you can see straight away there are three functions associated with the time function: hour, minute, and second. So I must tell Excel how many hours are associated with this particular function, with this particular row. But for each and every entry, each and every record in column A and B, there isn't any hours to consider. There's 0 hours throughout all of these. There's no minutes, there's no hours to consider, it's just minutes. So I can put 0 and then I can put my comma in place. For the minute, I absolutely do know the minutes for each row, and it's contained in column B. Don't go for column A because Excel can't cope with numbers and text. But here, where you've got a value that represents the minutes, click on that. And obviously, if this wasn't a table, it would just put B2, which would be absolutely fine. Doesn't need to be a function. Sorry, doesn't need to be in a table, but if we are in a table, it will obviously give you that lovely structured cell reference. Then you can add a comma, and then it wants to know the seconds. Now I don't have any seconds, it's 0 for each and every entry, so I am just going to put a 0 in place. And then I'm going to close the bracket. Now at that point, I'm ready to just click on the tick or press enter. And because I'm in a table, I'll get automatic autofill. Now it's not quite perfect yet. We've got some weird and wonderful stuff going on here that doesn't look quite right at all. I've got AM, I've got a 12 where I wouldn't have expected to see it, but I can see that my minutes are filtering through quite nicely. Let's have a look at making this display 0:14 and no AM or PM. Let's highlight all of C. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the format cells dialog box. I lost my train of thought slightly there. We're going to use the format cells dialog box, number format. That was what I was thinking. Now you can do that using Control and 1 if you like a keyboard shortcut, but if I give my mouse a wiggle, you'll see where I am, and I'm just going to launch it using this button here. From there, I am going to make sure that I click on time. And really what I want is either the second or the third option. There's very little difference between these two. This one will display the hours with one number if it can. This one will always, oh, sorry, it's the other way around. That one will use 2 numbers for the hour. This one, if it can, it will use 1 number for the hour. Always 2 for the minutes and 2 for the seconds. So I'm going to go for this second option, 2 hours, 2 digits for minutes and 2 digits for seconds. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to click on custom just so that you can see that in its entirety, because I don't even want this @ sign, don't need it. I don't even want those 2 second signs to come through, and I don't want the colon to appear either. And if I'm honest with you, what I'm also going to do, just ready for when I use my sum function at the end more than anything else, is I'm going to add some square brackets around that H. Just overtyped a H by accident there. Because what that will do is it will cater for the idea that sometimes the number of hours will go over 24. And when you're summing time it's always wise to put square brackets around those H's, not necessarily the minutes, just the H's, because as soon as Excel hits midnight, I'm getting some weird beeps coming through and I don't know what they are. I think I might be being too loud. That's what it might be, hurting people's ears. Anyway, so I'll try and avoid that. So the square brackets just cater for the idea that as soon as Excel is adding together lots and lots of time, if it hits 24 hours, which is a full day, it reverts to 0, 0, colon, 0, 0. Whereas you might be adding something together that adds up to 25 hours, in which case you definitely need the square brackets. Now, it doesn't matter for each of the entries that we've got in each of our rows here for the data, because they're all definitely less than a day. However, when we're adding something up at the end underneath the data, we might run over 24 hours. So when we're thinking about 25 hours, if you haven't got the square brackets around the H's, you'll probably see 0, 1, colon, 0, 0, when actually you want to see 25, colon, 0, 0. It's really confusing, and it's all to do with how Excel copes with 0 to a full day. So add the square brackets and you'll see how it'll work now. So there we go. That's exactly what I was hoping to see. We've got 0 to represent no hours. We've got 1, 4 to represent the minutes for each and every row. And what I also want to do is add this together now. There's no point when you're using a table in having a sum function. Instead, what you want to do is make really good use of the total row. So make sure you're in table design, make sure you're in total row. And if you can't see that table design, it's very likely that you've clicked outside of your table. Just click back inside it and it will reappear. If I hit the tick for total row there, I will get something weird and wonderful, which is basically letting me know that there are 29 entries. So weirdly, Excel isn't trying to add these up straight away. It's trying to count how many of them contain time. And then if I change this to sum, that's when I'll see something that represents what's more likely. So straight away as well, by magic, Excel's taken all of these minutes. If it's hit an hour, it's built in the hours calculation rather than just telling me how many minutes in total and going over 60. It's converting each time it hits an hour into 11 hours and 16 minutes in total. So that's how we would cope with this particular scenario. I'm building in another video in a couple of minutes. I'm about to do it now to just focus on what happens if we've got hours to entertain and minutes within the same column. But that's it for just focusing on how I can extract minutes from values, numbers, and text.